for how to build a career and life around things you love. Let's welcome Derek Magill.
Rock and roll. Hey guys, Craig, thanks for the awesome introduction. I really appreciate it, and thanks for putting on this conference. This was a long time coming, so I'm really excited to be here and excited to see so many awesome people. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about how to build a career and a life that you love, and I'll start out by adding maybe 2 disclaimers to that statement. So I'm probably going to say a couple or a lot of bad things about school and bad things about college. But this does not mean that college is not valuable, that it can't be valuable, nor does it mean that education is not important and that ideas do not matter. So let's establish that at the outset, because every time during the QA someone will ask me, you know, are you basically an anti-intellectual? And I couldn't be further from the truth. Ideas are supremely important. I think they're too important to be relegated to the classroom. Now I'm going to be also giving some very specific things that I think generally work for people, some very specific strategies and things that I've done that I've seen hundreds of people kind of around, frankly, around the world do. But don't get too hung up if you're a young person, or even if you're older looking for advice. Don't get too hung up on the very specific strategies. You know, really think about what's the underlying core of those strategies and apply them to your own life. Some of them may or may not work for you. That's great. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not a done-for-you solution, but it is the best things that I've come up with so far over the course of, I would say, a fairly unconventional career path of my own. So I'll tell you just a little bit about my story. So for most of my life, I was a really good student. I kind of, you know, did all the things I was supposed to do. I tried to check all the boxes. I did extracurriculars and played sports, and I was the class president, and I was also the student body president, did kind of both in high school. Tried to check off all the boxes, did my ACT, SAT prep, got into some good schools. I ended up going to the University of Michigan for classics, so I was studying Latin and Greek. I was our Latin and Greek person, which I do think is a tremendously important learning endeavor, but it was really, you know, something that I cared about. And the reason I went to college was not so much that I went for the job, but because I wanted that intellectual experience. I really wanted to be in an environment where I felt like I was around people who wanted to learn, who wanted to challenge me, who wanted to discuss ideas. And unfortunately, at the University of Michigan, at least, it was sort of the opposite. So what I got instead was, I think, a lot of people who were in the classes because it was part of their degree requirement, not because they cared about the subject. People who were there because their parents wanted them to be there, not because they wanted to be there. People who didn't want to do the readings. Professors who didn't, you know, really seem to care a whole lot about the students. And a combination of sort of frustration with the university experience, as well as the absolutely just ridiculous cost for the return on the value you're supposed to be getting. And just sort of the, I think what I saw to be the increasing kind of politicization of the campus. I actually ended up suing the university over a free speech issue and won, but kind of a combination of that, I dropped out of college during my sophomore year and took a job as a political campaign manager. So that was actually before I got involved with Praxis. I was running a congressional race in Michigan for U.S. State Congress, or U.S. Congress. And I thought, you know, I've got a job right away. I didn't even have to do a whole lot because I had a nice connection from a friend who got me this job. And if we win, I'm gonna be making really great money in Washington, D.C. And then 3 months later, we lost. And I was out of a job and no degree. And I should mention that when I left college, I didn't drop out the neat, nice way where you go tell the university you want to take some time off or something like that. I just didn't show up at my finals, and the university basically banned me for like 3 years for academic probation. So I had no option. I couldn't go back. I was out of a job, and I had to start figuring out, what am I going to do? How am I going to get a job? Everybody's always told me my entire life that the degree is the way to get the job. And I'm going to be talking about kind of kind of why that's not the case and what you can do instead to start your career at a much earlier age than you're traditionally told is possible, and kind of what I did. So over the last couple of years, I've worked as a political campaign manager for a congressional race. I built eBay and Amazon stores for a handful of companies, worked in the firearm industry extensively, and the Glock handgun industry in particular. Worked for Colliers International as a graphic designer and a researcher for them, so for commercial real estate properties. So I was the guy who would go out and take photos of the properties. I would also do research of the maps around the area, basically, and design PDFs of maps with all the local retail stores in the area to kind of get a proper evaluation for the investors. I did that for about a year as well, or on a contract basis, and then sort of grew kind of a marketing business. And through that, I became the director of marketing at Praxis, and now I run my own company, Pathly. And Pathly is a platform for on-demand career mentorship from people who have actually done the kind of jobs that you want to be doing. So you're not just going to be learning from business professors who have never had an actual business job. You are learning directly from people who have done the kind of job you want to do. So if you want to go into marketing, you'll talk to a marketing director. If you want to go into development, you'll talk to someone who's done development at a startup. If you want to go into the field of ideas, you want to be an intellectual of sorts, you'll talk to an intellectual. You'll talk to someone who's actually done it. And we've been growing tremendously over the last 2 weeks or so. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm happy to talk more about that during the QA. But let me kind of define a problem. So I call the problem mass Keatingization. If you guys have read The Fountainhead, this is the problem, mass Keatingization. Peter Keating is sort of the second-hander, the quintessential second-hander who lives his life, in many ways sort of through the standards and values of other people without actually determining what he himself wants to do. And this is kind of what I think is going on in schools today. Students are spending basically their entire lives living with their goals being determined for them by other people. You are checking off boxes. Your goals are determined largely by academic institutions that are determined really ultimately by the state, particularly if you're in public school. You are also at the same time creating no marketplace value. And the example I like to give is in school you can write an essay that would get an A and a great grade that would never sell in the real world and that nobody would ever want to read and nobody would ever get any value from whatsoever. This is and this is certainly my experience. I mean, you definitely do not want to read the papers I got A's on in college. This is a problem because we expect kids to kind of, come out of school after that process of having all your goals basically determined for you, done basically to check boxes and to please parents and to please administrators and to please teachers. And succeeding without actually creating marketplace value. Now we expect them to come out and actually be able to do that, to be able to be self-driven actors in the real world and create value in the marketplace. I think we're seeing sort of the bad results of that right now. There's a great quote from The Fountainhead, which is basically, if you want my advice, Peter, you've made a mistake already by asking me, by asking anyone. Never ask people not about your work. Don't you want to know? Don't you know what you want? How can you stand it not to know? But this is kind of how you live your life the first 18 years of it or so. And it's very problematic now when you come out of college and you're expected to sort of flip a switch. An example of this kind of I like to give to maybe make it more clear, my friend Isaac, the founder of Praxis, has this article which is, if we taught bike riding like we taught careers, or we taught young people today. And if that were the case, you would go to school for bike riding, and instead of riding the bike, you would study bike theory, and you would study the history of biking, and you would study gender in biking, and how the bike is a tool of capitalist oppression, and to keep the proletariat down, and all that kind of great stuff, and how bikes are racist because they don't fit. I don't know. Bikes are have all these sorts of problems, and you would do all this stuff, and you'd go through 18 years of it, and you'd get A's, but you'd never have ridden a bike, and that's essentially what's happening right now. That was certainly my life, and I don't think I'm the exception at all. So. Life for young people today is a conveyor belt of people-pleasing, hoop jumping, and checkbox marking from public school through college. And if you just ask students, you go around a campus and actually poll people, and I've done this, they're basically going to tell you, for the most part, with some exception, there are people who genuinely want to be there, but there's going to be a lot of people who are basically going to say, I don't know why I'm here. I just think I need the degree, any degree. It doesn't really matter. My parents are making me do it. I have nothing else to do. No, I'm not finding it valuable, but I'm already here, so I might as well keep finishing it. This is kind of the general environment on campus. I think for the majority of people, I would say 80+%, which is, again, just a very bad way of living your life. This hoop jumping is terrible and the results are terrible. So there was a recent study that came out in Brian Kaplan's, Brian Kaplan wrote a book called The Case Against Higher Education, which is an incredible book, and he goes into some of the failures of the current system. And one of the statistics he reports is something like 60% of employers are reporting that their students, recent graduates who they're hiring, do not meet any basic metrics whatsoever for employability across the board. And that includes things like communication, that includes things like timeliness, that includes things like skills and general competence, as well as writing ability, and a host of other things. These people are basically totally unprepared for the workplace. And I think more broadly, it's a horrible way to build your career because it's a very unselfish way of building your career. It is the unselfish approach to life. It's the thing that says, I'm on this conveyor belt, it's been determined by other people, and I just have to do it. Why? Well, because other people say I have to do it. And this is the path that everybody else has done, so I need to go do it. Though if you remember, in the Fountainhead, for example, Howard Rourke doesn't quite drop out of college, but gets kicked out and then refuses to go back. And that's the kind of approach that I think is required today in order to build a successful career for yourself. So I'm going to run through some of the, I think, common false beliefs that people have today about building a career. Number one, I'm too young. This is a very common one. It's something that I sort of accepted for a long time. I think a lot of young people today are taught to sort of excuse themselves from the responsibility of actually jumping into real world work because they're a certain age. This sort of school approach, again, is you treat your life in terms of a very specific number. It's like I'm 16, so I'm supposed to be doing things that 16-year-olds do, and I'm 17, so I'm supposed to be doing things that 17-year-olds would do, and now I'm a senior in high school, so I'm supposed to do the things that seniors do. There's never really the question of, what if I just did the opposite? What if I did something else? And the thing that I've realized over the last few years working with people is that you can start your career at 15, 16, 17 years old. There's actually somebody in here who started her career at 15. Where is she? Where's my 15-year-old, my former 15-year-old? I don't know, maybe she's not in here. I can't believe she didn't come to my talk. Really? Caitlin, are you here? Caitlin? No?
She was here. She's working.
She's probably working. She's probably working. No, it's okay, so Caitlin Scheel, I met her, she was 15 years old at a Foundation for Economic Education conference, and she now, basically by 15 and a half or so, she was working full-time for a company in Australia, and she's been doing that since. And now she's going to be moving, I guess, to Australia for 7 months coming up real soon to continue her career, and she's only, I don't even know if she's 18 yet. Is she 18 yet? Do you know?
She's 17.
Yeah, she's 17, and she's doing things that, people are not doing today until they're, 23 years old. So it's incredible, and this is kind of the thing that I've seen across the board, is it really, your age is not particularly relevant. You can start your career, and you can even get around a lot of, sort of, there she is, Caitlin. I was just talking about you. So Caitlin is an absolute hero, and she is proving firsthand that you can start your career whenever you want. I mean, she's done it. She's living the self-directed life, which is really, really cool. So second one, I need a degree. It's just not the case anymore, and I'm going to explain why, but I'll hold that off in a minute. You do not need a degree in the vast majority of cases outside of legal, cartels like medicine and law. Well, I mean, they are cartels. They're legally, controlled by the state. You cannot practice medicine without some bureaucrat who has never practiced medicine approving of you. Number three, I don't meet X requirement. I don't meet the specific checkbox. This is a kind of a function of the school system to learning, that you think that you need to meet, some very, very specific requirements, or you can't get the kind of opportunity that you want. I'll explain in a little bit why that's not true as well. There's that great quote, though, from Howard Rourke, which is, I guess the dean says, "My dear fellow, who will let you?" And he's like, "That's not the point. The point is who will stop me." And That's not just nice sounding words. There's actually a lot of truth to that as well. Next one is I have to prepare more. I need to go study more. Don't get me wrong, studying is great, preparation is great, but I think we are in a state of sort of chronic over-preparation nowadays among students, to the point where they are sacrificing their ability to actually practice something in the real world to try to pad their resume with more stuff. And this is kind of a common thing that I'm seeing. I'm seeing kids who graduate college and can't find a job, and they think the first thing they need to do is go back to school and get another degree, which is just terrible. It's a terrible way of going about your career. The thing that I sort of experienced was that a lot of the stuff you're going to be doing professionally, you have to learn on the job with some bare minimum stuff that you kind of get under your belt beforehand. You have to learn the rest on the job, and going out and studying a textbook for this stuff is not really going to help you in a lot of cases. Next one. I should take on college debt to get a degree. If you want to build a career in life you love, the thing you should do above all else first is not take on college debt. College debt is a huge problem. I don't know if you guys know, it's like $1.6 trillion in the US now. The average debt is $40,000 per graduate, and that doesn't take into account interest. So by the time it's all said and done, the average college graduate, if they can even pay off their loans, because 1 million people are defaulting every single year, if you can actually pay off your loans, you will end up paying around $70,000, I would say, typically on that $40,000. So it's a lot of money, it's a lot of debt to start your career off with, and it's going to severely limit your options in some ways that will be made clear in a moment. Okay, so the last one, and I would say, this is just one that I kind of threw in there, is I need to choose between purpose and profit. This is a vicious false dichotomy taught to you by schools and pop culture. It is not true. Profit is purpose, and profit creates purpose. So next thing, how to actually build a career. So now we've kind of covered, I guess, some of the misconceptions, but how to actually build a career. And there's a couple things. There's just a couple things to remember. There are just like one thing really that businesses care about, and there's a difference. It's an economic principle. There's a difference between expressed preferences and actual preferences in the marketplace. So if you're coming out into the marketplace and you're looking at job applications and professional opportunities, you're probably going to see things like degree required. You're going to see things like X years of experience required. You're going to see things, other kind of traits and things that people are, that the businesses have laid out as things that they want in their people who are, the people they are hiring. So a lot of people, they look at this and they disqualify themselves immediately because they don't check the boxes. They don't have that degree, or they don't have the proper degree, or they don't have the level of experience that's required, and so they don't even go after the opportunity. The reality is, revealed preferences are more important in the marketplace. This is something you learn as a marketer too, and something you learn in sales. What people say is less important than how they actually feel and what they actually think on the inside. So when a business says, I need a degree, they don't really literally mean, I'm going to turn away amazing talent if they don't have a degree. What they mean is, I need someone who can create more value than they take out in salary, and the degree seems to be the best way to signal it right now. That's all the degree is really, ultimately. It's a signaling mechanism for talent. If you understand that, though, you can start to consider, how can I signal that in another way, and maybe even a better way, in a world where everybody else has the same signal. How can I then stand out in a better way? Because everybody applying to these jobs is all going to have a degree. They all have roughly the same life experiences. How can I then, go to a business and signal, hey, I'm better than the average. I'm better than that piece of paper. I am more interesting than my college degree. And that's really the goal, the foundational goal, if you want to go out and actually start building a career, is you need to be more interesting than your degree status. I mean, I still get asked today, I was at the coffee shop the other day and I was like, oh, I'm living in Salt Lake City. And the guy's like, oh, what are you studying? I mean, I get asked that all the time, and I think every young person in the room can relate to that. You are basically a student. You're, at that age, everybody assumes that. So the goal is, I need to stand out and be something different, and to actually be able to signal that I have more than the piece of paper, whether you have it or not. So what signals value in the marketplace in today's world? So I like to give kind of a tale of two students who are applying for basically the same job. So one person has a degree in marketing, and they've just graduated college. The other one doesn't have a degree in marketing, but he has a blog that he writes about marketing on. He documents marketing strategies. He maybe even has a client that he's worked with, and he has a testimonial. And he has a portfolio on his website as well from a couple little things that he's done, projects that he's done. They're applying to the same job. Who do you think gets hired? It's basically no question. The person with a degree who doesn't have anything does not get hired basically every single time. And I've seen this play out over and over and over again. So to signal value, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but essentially your GitHub profile, your Quora profile, your personal blog, your portfolio online, the podcast that you went on or the podcast that you ran, the guest posts that you've written on different websites. Maybe you wrote one for the Objective Standard. These things are better signals today in the marketplace because they show real-world competence and they show real-world accomplishment. When I went out to go start getting job opportunities, I found that my degree status was totally irrelevant. People never even wanted to ask about it because I had a personal website where I blogged about my career, and I blogged about what I was working on, and I blogged about the companies that I was working with, and I blogged about the podcast that I just went on to talk about ideas that were meaningful to me, or someone saw a guest article that I wrote on another site, or someone saw that I was answering questions on Quora, and I had 1.5 million views on Quora. These were the things that actually got me opportunities, and we're seeing more and more in a world where everybody has a degree and a degree is no longer scarce. The thing that is scarce among young people is real-world, demonstrable, documented accomplishment. So that's the new signal. That's how you build your own credential. And then, of course, among other things, getting your basic skills down. But one of the hardest questions that I think a lot of people have these days is, how do I know what I actually want to do professionally? So it's one thing to kind of give some ideas about how you can signal value in the marketplace, but it's another to actually figure out what you want to do. And it's very difficult. It's not easy to figure it out. I think we're looking for a very neat, easy solution. You're in school, you basically go sign up for your classes and you pick a major, and everything seems super, super simple. And then you get out into the real world and you realize that your major in Chinese music and I don't know, something else stupid doesn't really help you get a job. I like to say, the absence of certainty is not certainty of absence. So a lot of people don't have certainty and they use that as an excuse not to get started at all. It's like, I need to go pick my passion right away, and I'm going to dedicate my entire life to it. And if I'm wrong, like, I've totally screwed everything up. And that's just not the case. I like to take what I call a bottom-up approach to building a career. And this is kind of what I recommend to everybody, is instead of picking like a top-down category, like I'm going to go into marketing, or I'm going to go into sales, or I'm going to go into whatever, pick specific deliverable projects and just work on those. And then build up into a category from there. So, you might not know whether you want to go into marketing, but maybe you have an interest in photography, and that sort of relates to marketing in some sense. So maybe just go do that photography project that you have an opportunity to do. Or maybe you might not know that you want to go into sales, but there's some opportunity to do some sales writing or something like that. Or there's an opportunity to take a customer success role at a company. It really doesn't matter. Just get stuff under your belt, and you'll start to build up into what you might call a category. And the more you do, the more that category will shift and things will change in time. But the process of discovery is a very practical process. It's not something necessarily for most people that you're going to read about and say, this is the perfect career for me. Or you're going to take some kind of personality test and it'll determine that this is the kind of job you should go into. It just typically doesn't work that way. If it works for you, fantastic. But in my experience, you just need to try a whole lot of stuff. And that's kind of what I did, and it took years, but I finally started to kind of work up into something that I'm really, really excited about. So once you're kind of ingrained in that mindset, this mindset of I'm just going to go try a lot of stuff, I'm just going to go get as many opportunities as I can get. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to make projects and document those projects online so that I build up a portfolio. What next? Well, how to get a job when you want to actually go get experience. And there's basically just a handful of ways that I think you can do it. Now, we've talked about sort of building your signal, but what about other ways? So businesses want, fundamentally, like I said, value creators. They want people who can create more value than they take out in salary. So it's your job in the hiring process to go out and actually signal that. And this is how you get any opportunity you want. Literally almost anything you can do with this. And it's called a value proposition. It's basically, instead of going to a job and filling out an application and saying, here's my resume and my degree and my transcripts, hire me, You think about what is actually going on at that business. What does that business actually want? And how can I actually create value for them? How can I actually bring revenue in? Or how can I make this job valuable for them? And then you pitch that to them. You say, I want to do these 3 things for you. And this is a kind of a way of sidestepping most of the, I would say, traditional barriers to hiring. You know, who does a business want to hire? The person who just kind of comes in and says, hey, give me a job, I showed up, or the person who says, here are 3 ideas that I want to try out for the first month on the job. So when I went out to go get my first opportunities, like for example, when I went to go apply to Praxis, they weren't even hiring. They didn't have a role basically created for me. So I just went to them and said, hey guys, I saw that there's a couple things that we could work on. We could do some videos for your social media and run those as ads. We can create some graphics, and we can film your opening seminar for all your students. And by the way, I will do that for free. It's like, who's going to say no to that, you know? And a lot of people look at that and they say, oh, working for free is exploitation. But exploitation compared to what? I mean, compared to paying $50,000 a year to a college where and taking on debt that you can't declare bankruptcy on. So for me, having a value proposition, offering to work for free or for cheap, so you lower the barrier to entry. One of the things that we like as consumers is things like free trials, and we like refunds. We love that kind of stuff because it allows us to take risks on products. This is the same thing with hiring. A lot of businesses, a lot of young people don't realize the kind of risks that businesses assume when they're hiring new people. So there's a lot of hidden costs. There's a lot of manpower costs. It typically takes 6 months to make an employee actually pay off. So it's a long time, and the turnover rate for new hires is very, very, very high. So if you're a young person and you can just reduce the risk of the hiring process, you can start landing opportunities that would traditionally be closed to you. So every single job opportunity that I got, I kid you not, was this way. Working for Colliers International, which is a very stodgy commercial real estate company that does not hire people without degrees. Absolutely, if you look it up, they don't hire people without degrees. I was able to work with them because I just lowered the barrier to entry. I offered to go out and take photos of Jalapenos Mexican restaurant all throughout Texas for free. And I did that for 17 hours straight. And then they started paying me. I had no photography experience prior to that. But suddenly I was doing photography for a large commercial real estate company. And I had no experience and no degree. This is kind of how you go out and start building opportunities. And once you understand this, the sky is kind of the limit. You can really start to unlock some really cool stuff. Really start to kind of create a meaningful career for yourself, because you're not going to necessarily have to go to the one thing that you just happen to, by chance, check all the boxes for. So, lastly, because we're at 30 minutes and I want to talk to you guys a little bit, pursuing mastery and beyond. So I've learned a lot over the last couple of years, kind of working through this and talking to people and building my own career. And I would say, fundamentally, like, it's important to recognize that all of this stuff we're talking about is just sort of a starting point. It's not really the end of your career. So life for young people in most cases is kind of a conveyor belt. But once you get out of that school environment, once you kind of get out on your own, it's no longer a conveyor belt. It's much more sort of staccato paced. There's a lot of ups and downs. And I guess I want to encourage young people in this room who are thinking about starting their careers to not worry so much about finding the exact thing right away, and just kind of understand that this process, you're going to be building up into more and more opportunities that are not even possible for you to see yet. And that was certainly the case with me. I mean, I definitely did not master plan my career. When I got out of college, I didn't really know that something like Praxis would exist for me to go become the director of marketing at, and I didn't even know that Colliers International existed, or that I would even be interested in doing commercial real estate work at all. It was just something that I kind of fell into because I saw one opportunity, and another opportunity, and another one led to another one, and led to another one. So that would be, my advice to you is just, if you don't have certainty about what you want to do, just enjoy the process, try as many things as possible, document all of that online, build a digital paper trail for yourself so that when somebody Googles you, they can tell what you're all about and what you've actually done. And the world is going to be your oyster. So. And lastly, just be selfish. So thank you guys so much, and if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
question. What year did you start the University of Michigan?
Yeah, so 2012, I guess, fall of 2012.
Start.
Yep. So I'm 25 years old now, and I left sort of at the end of my sophomore year.
Good.
Hey,
Is
Tyler.
it on? Okay, it is. Do you have advice on cultivating a passion rather than discovering it? So this could be related to work ethic, or it could be making choices about that would maybe result in developing a passion for work that you're good at but don't feel strongly for.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think in general, like passion is developed through the process of working. It's not necessarily something that comes sort of a priori to that. So I would just, my general advice is to say yes to every single opportunity that you have in the beginning. Do everything possible, to anything really. I mean, that was kind of my policy, was just say yes to everything. And then there'll become a certain point where it's like you can start saying no to stuff because you finally have figured out kind of what you want to do. I'm not really sure there's a better way to do that. Just do everything you can, do it as well as possible, and a couple of those things are going to start to stick. You know, just keep your eyes open and follow the money, really. I mean, follow the opportunities, and it'll take you interesting places that might not have necessarily been open to you before.
Great, thanks.
First, briefly, are you running your company out of Charleston? Because I'm from that area.
No, so Praxis is based in Charleston. I am based in Salt Lake City.
Oh, you are, okay. Anyway, one thing, I did everything you talk about, I did everything wrong, except that thankfully I didn't run up any debt. But got a couple degrees which are worthless, and I wanted to ask, one thing I noticed with myself and like some other people I know who tried to do the same thing, find jobs late in life, is getting past like your basic, you know, your human resource directors and your department heads,
yeah,
and not being able to get past the people that are really doing the hiring. What's the best way to find the people, the creative people that you need to talk to and get to them?
Yeah, I mean, HR is basically a government-created department, I mean, it exists mostly because of regulations. You know, I would say it depends on the kind of company you're applying for. I mean, yeah, I would say it's if you're trying to kind of get into something new, you haven't done anything in a long time, it's much easier to go to smaller companies that don't even have HR departments.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
You know, anything below 50 employees oftentimes doesn't even have HR, and so the person doing the hiring is the CEO, is the founder. Yeah. And they are typically much easier to talk to and much easier to make you know, some kind of unconventional pitch to them. So, you know, you can kind of take like a stair-step approach. You know, if you want to get to a bigger company later on, start at a smaller one. Yeah. Once you get all that experience at the smaller one, the doors to the bigger ones open up.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Now, obviously, I'm pretty much older than most of the people in this room, but way back when I was about your age, my parents said, let's find out really what might be a fit for you. And I took a pretty exhaustive examination.
Yeah.
It was well over 12 hours of in-depth questioning, testing, et cetera, to find out what my likes, dislikes, capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, et cetera. I noticed that that was absent in your presentation. For you, unless I missed it.
Yeah, it was absent.
Why? What's the reason? What's your rationale for dropping that out of the program?
Oh, well, like testing, like, well, maybe it's just bad experience on my part. Like, I remember taking those things in schools, and it was funny because the schools do those things.
No, this is not a school. This is a profit-making organization that tests. Yeah. And again, gives a recommendation to you and your parents. And
so the school wasn't doing it. The school was getting paid by the company to basically to let them come in and take tests, and they would sell the data to larger companies in like bulk, basically. So we had to take a lot of those tests in school, and I don't know. I mean, I just never felt like it was a very particularly good way to do your career. Maybe there were better tests back then, but the ones that I took these days were full of I don't know, politically correct BS and all sorts of other nonsense that really set you, I would say, set you down a bad path more than anything else. And it was just kind of these like cookie cutter job titles versus the dynamic range of opportunities that exist in the marketplace today. So I mean, maybe there's a test out there. I haven't seen it
There
yet.
are companies that are actually making money doing this.
Well, yeah. I mean, and if it
And
works
doing
for
a
you,
good job
if it
of
works
it.
for you, definitely do it.
It worked for my kids.
Then do it. I mean, it's awesome. I would say, I think the experiential approach is probably better.
No, I'm not denying the value of going with the experiential. In fact, I really encourage anybody that would come to me with advice is, get a job.
Yeah.
Get out there and find out what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, et cetera. I mean, that's all very important, but you got to get as many eggs into the basket as you can so that you make the best decision you can.
Yeah, if you want to take a test, take a test.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's really no other answer, I guess. Really, I mean, it's up to you. You can do it, and if it works
it's just
for you,
another tool. That's
exactly. And if it works for you, awesome. I mean, awesome.
So I was wondering about like step 2 after you finish that project you're ready to submit. You're kind of wondering maybe someone other than me should read this before I submit it to the client. What do you normally advise doing then?
Sign up for Pathly. We can do it. Pay us $60 with a no questions asked refund policy, and we will help you out. But seriously, no, I'll answer it more broadly too. Like, yeah, it's definitely good to have someone review it, because what most people end up doing is they over-communicate and they add a bunch of stuff in there that really shouldn't necessarily be in there. These business owners, they're getting tons of emails every single day. The general policy should be brief, be bright, and be gone. So you want to be as short as possible, demonstrate the kind of value that you can create, and allow them to basically make a yes-no decision. Because any longer that they have to think about it creates a lot of extra overhead. I'm sure people who have had these kind of pitches before given to them, there's a lot of people in here who are professors and stuff like that. I'm sure they've had students, want to work with them as well. The more they have to think about it, the more likely they are to say no, even if it's a good thing ultimately. So, you want to make it falsifiable as falsifiable as possible.
Thank you. I'm older, and I'm starting my own business and just getting going with it. So I'm finding what you're telling us is helpful as somebody who's 60 plus, and I hope other people in here feel the same. Would you expand on what you said, bottom-up approach, and where you got that term? Because I've heard it before from marketing, positioning people, and I'm just wondering if you tell us more about that term.
I just kind of made it up, I guess. I just thought, like, typically, you're picking like a top-down category, and I guess a top-down category would be like marketing, sales, operations, development, and stuff like that. And that's kind of how you're traditionally picking things in school. Like, you go pick a major, pick history. I've just seen kind of the results of that from a lot of young people that I've seen kind of, I've talked to around the world, and it just seems like that leads to a lot of uncertainty. It's much better just to get started by picking really concrete projects and things that you can actually work on. And then you build up into a category later on. So like, I didn't set out to be in marketing. I had no idea whether I wanted to do marketing or not. It was just that I saw a couple opportunities in front of me. One was to manage a social media account, and to do some photography and do some video stuff, and maybe and then you kind of see I can do some Facebook ads too. And then one day you're like, oh, I'm kind of like doing marketing, and I've sort of built up into a career in marketing. Now, if you have that category picked out, like if you're certain, that's fine. Like I don't think you should take that approach if you really do know what you want to do. That's great. But it's just that it's very difficult to know what you want to do at that age. And so rather than waiting around trying to figure out that top category, get started now, even if you don't have that certainty on deliverable projects, and you'll figure it out as you go.
I've had a career as an electrical engineer, and I basically knew something I wanted to do, and I was a hobbyist, and so I was fixing TVs when I was 13, and I'm old. The transistor was just coming out, and I was buying these transistors for $5, which you could buy a bag of groceries in those days, and learning by doing. So I came into college kind of like a technician. I already knew something. Well, the college had nothing to do with that. It was 180 or 90 degrees to that. It was teaching me higher forms of mathematics and electromagnetic field theory and things that technicians don't know. So it was valuable. And what I did during my college career was summer jobs with companies. And so I was at Texas Instruments, and they said, oh, okay, here's a student. And they said, well, we want to take a look at this circuit. I ran up to Tektronix scope, and I'm setting up with both hands. They go, oh, geez. So guess what? After my summer there, they really wanted me to come back. I mean, they were really chasing me. But I wanted to go on to a master's, so I did that, and then I worked at Bell Laboratories, summer.
Yeah.
Impressed them, had all sorts of job offers, could have been in 5 or 6 different departments. So there's another approach, is you really know what you want to do, and you improve on that, and then you go out and prove yourself with some summer job or something, and then you're on your way.
Yeah, I mean, you were doing a lot of stuff that kind of helped inform your decision before you even went to college, and I think that's valuable. Like, I never say people just shouldn't go to college. I mean, but you should try before you certify, you know? Another rhyme for you guys. You know, you should actually go out and try to experience the kind of career that you want to go into, that you're going to go pay a premium for. I mean, you know, you test drive a car before you go spend $50,000 on a car, but you're not supposed to test drive a 4-year degree. I mean, that's insane. I would say, you know, if you want to go into medicine, for example, go actually intern at a doctor's office and go actually talk to a doctor and see what they actually do. You know,
engineering is hard, and I was surprised that 90% of my students that I was with had no background in electronics, didn't know whether they liked it or not when they were done. They just picked something and started doing it and did book learning, and when they came out, they needed to be trained from the ground up.
Exactly.
So you know, that's your point, I think.
Yep.
Hey, how's it going? Appreciate the talk.
Yeah, thanks.
So my question is concerning the value that you put on like having a presence online, right? Like a LinkedIn application or a profile or whatever. I'm from a thriving metropolis of like 12,000, 15,000 people. And it's super, super blue collar, low income area.
Yeah.
Basically all just corporations like Subways, fast food restaurants, corporate retail. So I've worked jobs like that. I've been a general manager of a Pizza Hut when I was 21 years old. I'm a couple years older than you are. I'm in college currently. I have a idea of where I want to go, but I'm interested in learning just about jobs that are outside, like private companies and what people outside of, you know, my town are actually interested in. And it's tough because there's, you know, that barrier of just me being stuck where I'm at for right now. I would literally just be taking a chance, and I have, you know, a son and a fiance to care for. So I was just wondering about how you feel about building that online presence and how that could benefit me.
Well, I mean, it all depends on the kind of opportunity you want to go after. You know, it's not a universal solution, but you know, companies are going to Google you. They are going to look you up. They're gonna see your Facebook page. This is just a fact. They're gonna see, you know, your LinkedIn or your Twitter or your Instagram. Every business owner that I know is pretty much looks up their, you know, potential hires nowadays online. So, you know, you really don't have an option about what, you know, there's that line in Philosophy Who Needs It. It's like you don't have an option whether to use philosophy or not. It's just whether you're going to, you know, consciously follow that, create a philosophy, or, you know, yourself and actually deliberately form your values and opinions or not, or whether you're going to be kind of influenced by the world around you. This is kind of the same thing with a personal brand, you know, online, is you really don't have an option. You have that whether you like it or not nowadays if you do anything online. So the question is, you know, are you going to take deliberate control of that and control what people see and direct them in a direction that you want to have them go in or not? But, you know, I mean, for most fields, I think it is valuable. I mean, if you're going into engineering, you know, having places where you document the things that you've built and the job opportunities that you've had, or you break down your learning process and the books that you've read and things like that, I think that's a very powerful signal. I know people who have gotten job offers just because the CEO looked on their website and looked at their book reading list and the notes that they had and thought that was really, really cool, and that this person is actually educated because they've actually broken down the books that they've read. So, you know, what are you wanting to go into? Do you know?
I'm a little bit undecided. I'm working toward a degree right now, the double major in psychology and philosophy. Philosophy is sort of my own personal endeavor.
Are you writing online about psychology and philosophy?
Not really, no.
Well, there's your first step. I mean, I meet journalist students all the time who are journalism, like almost graduates, and they don't have anything that they've published.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. So I mean, that's kind of the first step, I think, is to start actually, you know, writing about your classes, write about the stuff you're learning, write about the ideas that matter to you. Now, you're not going to be an expert right now, but that shouldn't stop you from doing things within your current capacity. And when people see that, you're going to have a nice track record of actually having engaged with that field in some kind of meaningful way versus, I just have a couple papers that I wrote for a class.
Right. Awesome.
So,
thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before about kind of distinguishing yourself from the other candidates and everything, and you said quite correctly, I would say that an undergraduate degree is no longer useful for that purpose. I was wondering though, taking one step further and doing a master's degree, like the MBA or anything like that, what do you think about that? Do you think it's like worth the investment, and are there like perhaps other I guess practical. Yeah. Is it like a practical way to distinguish yourself, or is it just like another waste of money, for example?
Well, it's never a waste of money if you have a specific goal, and like none of this is a waste of money categorically. It's just a waste of money if you're passive about it and you don't have really any clear aim. College is one of those premium goods that people spend on mindlessly, pretty much, just because they think they're supposed to. And I think that's a bad way to do it. And I think master's degrees can be very much the same way. I meet people all the time who have graduated from a college and don't have a job prospect, and they think, well, I just need to go get a master's because that will make me hireable. And I don't really think that just adding that to your resume is going to make you more hireable. I think a master's generally should probably be something that you go get if you are already working and you find that there's some reason that that level of information or knowledge might be more valuable to get you to the next step in your career. But if it doesn't serve that aim, then I would say probably don't go get it. I personally don't really think it's ever valuable just to pad your resume with a credential just because you think that credential itself will unlock a door. If going to that school is going to give you knowledge that you can't access yourself, or experience or network that you can't access yourself, then that could be valuable. But I think if you're just expecting that extra little tagline next to your name to unlock opportunities, even though you haven't gotten any new skills or experiences, it's probably not going to be useful.
So just to expand a little bit on that, many people say that you have to do the MBA, for example, just to kind of prove you're capable and like as a credential and everything. You think, okay. Yeah. I mean,
I guess there's some jobs that may be more difficult to get without that MBA, but it's always value in comparison to what alternatives. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to take an extra 2 years out of the market without working, you've already done 4 years or so of undergraduate, so now you're 6 years outside of the marketplace. You have, not getting experience, you're losing earnings. That might not be as valuable as just going out and getting a job, working at a business, and getting a track record of actually growing a company. And then from there, you might go get an MBA. And if you can't unlock the exact opportunity you want now, it still might be better to go out and actually just go work at a company you can work at now, get those extra few years of experience, and then go back to that new opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's what I generally think, but it's all contextual and depends on the individual life.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so Derek, thank you.
I think we've met before. Right?
Yes, we have.
Good to meet you.
In my university experience, I found the most value in the non-traditional classes. Taking a painting course, even though it wasn't required or recommended for my major. Yeah. Taking a philosophy course, doing those extracurricular things. Yeah. And what I found now is I still like to do something for a period of time, yeah, and then jump to something else. Yeah. But the unifying experience of all of that is the ability to communicate these activities. So, like you had recommended, to start a blog, something like that. But I find creating video content or speaking on a video frame would be a better approach for what I'm interested in and how I like to communicate. Yeah. How would you recommend creating a professional brand using visual communication as opposed to writing? Oh, geez. I mean, I haven't done a whole lot of that. But I mean, I've seen it done. The production value is amazing nowadays, But if you look back at like old like people who are doing that kind of stuff, who are considered really good now, really professional, all their old stuff is very dumpy and tacky. So it's fine to get started like that and just build your audience like that, and then kind of grow into higher and higher levels of production value as you get better and better and better at doing it. Are there certain venues or mediums that you would find would be advantageous to break into? So YouTube is oversaturated now, but I mean, it's YouTube's one of the greatest still. I mean, it's growing faster than Facebook. But I think podcasting's better because
that's a much lower barrier to entry. You know, you can do the talking thing still, but you don't need to worry about the lighting and production value of the video and stuff like that. So you might do something like that. And with a podcast, you know, just commit to doing like a 10-part season of a particular topical podcast or something like that. And, you know, from there you can kind of, if you want to continue it, go do the rest of it and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick one. What did you do for Glock, and how did you get there?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in the firearm industry, actually. I grew up with guns on the kitchen counter. Not always loaded, but I grew up with a dad. I grew up with a dad who would shoot underwater in my backyard pool. Yeah, so my father is the owner of a company called Glock Store. Glockstore.com. They manufacture Glock parts and accessories and pieces, triggers, guide rods, basically anything you can imagine, slides, ship them all around the world. And so one of the things that I did was I reached out to him and basically said, hey, you got to get on eBay and Amazon. You know, we got to sell this stuff there. And so I managed their eBay store and their Amazon store and did all the shipping and fulfillment and the photography. And then we did the Amazon store, did $2 million its first year. And I kind of used that as well to go out and jump into other stuff in the firearm industry too. So I started working with a handful of other businesses that I met at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas, which is the largest international firearms trade show in the world. And it did marketing and stuff like that for them, as well as helping with some product launches and Instagram stuff. The gun stuff was very heavy on Instagram for a while, until they started cracking down on it a little bit. And yeah, so that was kind of it.
This is an amazing presentation, and it's actually really exciting to hear the possibilities of people creating a life for themselves that is not necessarily in a job description and they might not imagine. So on the one hand, people who might be naturally adventurous and enthusiastic and flexible and willing to, you know, cobble together things and experiment, that sounds like a really enticing path. What would you say, it sounds like though there's something deeper, more underlying as a person. What kind of skill set of resiliency toolbox perhaps you could pinpoint if people seem like they're interested in trying this approach because they don't want to do the Peter Keating thing and they don't know what they want to do, but it sounds really terrifying to them to attempt what you're doing. What kind of bridge of resiliency skills could you say you could work on these at the same time to help you get over the Keating hump?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's also this practical skills. I mean, general skills that help with it, like almost any field you're going into is marketing, sales, you know, a general understanding of business operations and stuff like that will inform, you know, almost any job you go into. So kind of getting a basic understanding of that stuff, I think is tremendously valuable. I mean, the most important thing is like the ability to see untapped value and to kind of understand what's going on in someone's head. So it's kind of an empathy thing. It's understanding like what do people actually want, and then developing that mindset in yourself that gets out of your own head and starts to think like, what does this business owner want, you know, and how can I help them get that? I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of young people just don't have that mindset. Like it's when they're applying to a job or they're trying to get some new opportunity, it's all about them. I'm a good learner. I'm a good communicator. I have these skills versus like, what's going on in his head or her head, and how can I give them what they actually want and need? I mean, that's ultimately, I think, the most important skill. You know, and if you have like a money-making mindset, kind of like, you know, I like to think of it the kind of person who walks into a room, walks into a business, and thinks, how is this business making money? What's their profit margins? These kind of things, like what's actually going on here? And once you kind of have that mindset, like you're going to see opportunity at any kind of company you go into. Other thing, I guess, just to kind of maybe get yourself over some of the uncertainty is like every single business, every single professional, you know, I know in any kind of field, there are all sorts of things they're not doing currently. And a lot of the problems that they have are problems that other companies and other organizations have. And once you start to identify a couple of those things, you can see like, oh my gosh, like every single company is doing the wrong thing. So like one of the things that I did, which was, it sounds so silly and easy, was just set up pop-ups on Shopify sites for companies. And people would pay like a premium for that because they had no idea what it was, and they weren't even doing it. And so I could go to all sorts of e-commerce stores, install a pop-up, start collecting emails, and we could literally just print money with those emails, and it was very easy basically to have a very clear ROI. And it's kind of silly because you think, well, you know, really all these companies aren't doing this already, but there's so many opportunities out there. So just understanding that businesses, professionals, successful people don't have it all figured out. They want help. They always want help. And if you can be the person to provide that, that's the way to do it. One more question, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned a lot about undertaking projects and kind of like trying to be creative, see what the business needs, but how would that advice perhaps change if we're talking about, for example, highly structured industry? So for example, finance, in which there's a very specific skill sets which like you can't really do on your own, or I'm sure there are other more technical industries, like what would you advise in those situations? So one of our graduates of Praxis, his name's Salem Marrero, and he works as a data analyst for the Tampa Bay, I guess Rays, I think it's the Rays, the professional baseball team. And he was the only person in the whole staff who has no degree. And the reason he got the job was he didn't make a project directly for them, but he was making projects, data analysis projects kind of around it, and he had like a really well-documented body of work so that when he applied to an opportunity, they basically said, you're the only person who's applying to this thing who actually has a history of doing data analysis at your age. And so with finance too, I mean, there's all sorts of, you know, I mean, it depends on the kind of finance you're going into, but there's probably a lot you can be doing on the side, your own projects and stuff like that, your own financial stuff, writing about finance, writing about markets, you know, covering those kind of things in depth. Those are the kind of things that will help unlock opportunities. And if the degree is an additional thing on top of that, then wonderful. If it's not, you know, no problem at all. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.